This is part 2 of a 5-part series. In a very practical sense, the problem raised by the subject-object split is huge. It can leave us afraid to live and afraid to die. But both of these anxieties, being afraid to live and being afraid to die, are really one single anxiety. The anxiety of being unable as a subject to resolve this conflict, this split. How are we supposed to live with this split? What if we die before the problem can be resolved? So no matter how wonderful you are, talented, loving, being loved, or perhaps you don't like how your life is going, for whatever reason, there's plenty of people who fall into that category. No matter how it is for your subjective experience, the fact is you will always need an object for you to arise as a subject. So even the evaluation of your life as good or bad becomes an object thought for you as your subject to consider. And since any particular object can only seem like yours, but never really truly be yours, there is always incompleteness or emptiness. We can survey the whole rest of the world. And since I feel a lack in myself, the incompleteness, since I carry it with me wherever I go, I have a very strong tendency to look outside of myself in hopes of alleviating the pressure. I look outside of myself in hope of resolving my off-balance situation. I can think it through and realize that nothing outside of myself will resolve this. But that's just an idea. I still tend to look outside a lot of the time. I still totally try to find things outside myself to alleviate the subject-object split. And that's what I want to talk about today. Hello and welcome to the 10 Crutches podcast. My name is David. I'm glad you're here. When I talk about things outside of you not being able to address this fundamental issue, I'm limiting myself to dealing with that. It seems to me worth pointing out. So the first thing to be said, I'm going to even repeat this later to hopefully make it very clear. There are many things outside of you that need to be done. I will say that once again. There are many, many things outside of you that need to be done. What I am saying here can be interpreted by people who aren't really listening. It can be interpreted as, oh, there's nothing outside of me that will help me. Oh, so why bother to do anything? Blah, blah, blah. No. Things have to get done. Issues have to be addressed. Children need to be raised. Diapers need to be changed. Gardens need tending to. Food has to be grown and gathered and cooked and eaten. Take a shit. You have to wipe your ass. I believe we need to do work for each other and with each other. There are injustices in the world that need to be faced, confronted, hopefully changed, etc., etc. I hope you get the idea. There are plenty of things worth doing that need doing and that need you to do them. Saying that there's nothing outside of you that will help is only talking about the subject-object split. Whether you have a really strong case of it, or even if you've somehow worked it all through, you still have to look around and decide, what are you going to do with your life? So this issue for me is not a hopeless, oh, what's the purpose of life if there's nothing outside of me that will solve the problem? Well, isn't it all hopeless? No, that's not at all what I'm saying. If, for example, you find yourself working for a cause that you think is important, that's great. We all have to pick and choose the causes we think are important and work for their achievement. And hopefully, while you're working for their achievement, you'll spend at least a little time talking and understanding the people that are opposed to you. Because that's how you tell you're actually working for the thing itself. It's not about you and grabbing onto this thing because it's going to make your subject feel better. It's about that you actually care what's going to happen in the world. And you can hear people who disagree with you because you care about them too. But if you're attempting to alleviate your deepest inner emptiness with your work or your tasks or your political goals or with something that you buy, it's not all that different from somebody who buys a fancy yacht and hopes that this yacht object and riding on the yacht object and having parties on the yacht object will alleviate the incompleteness of their subjective experience. All I am saying is that this fundamental subject-object split problem will not be touched one way or another by any of your subjective activities with the objects in your vicinity. One outcome of the subject-object split is this: being fulfilled can become confused with being something. And so people say to each other, you gotta make something of yourself. So I imagine I can be something. I can make something of myself. I can become some object worthy of being. And I imagine this will resolve my subject-object split for me. I am on a serious lookout for potential objects that might fit the bill. So here's a little clip from On the Waterfront, 1954 movie, directed by Elia Kazan. Here's Marlon Brando and Rod Steiger in the back of a car.
You remember that night in the garden, you came down my dressing room and said, "Kid, this ain't your night. We're going for the price on Wilson." You remember that? This ain't your night. My night. I could have taken Wilson apart. So what happens? He gets the title shot outdoors in a ballpark, and what do I get? A one-way ticket to Palookaville. You was my brother, Charlie. You should have looked out for me a little bit. You should have taken care of me just a little bit so I wouldn't have to take them dives for the short-end money.
Well, I had some bets down for you. You saw some money.
You don't understand. I could have had class. I could have been a contender. I could have been somebody. Instead of a bum, which is what I am. Let's face it.
I could have been a contender. I could have been somebody. That feeling of that the choice is you either got to be somebody or you're going to be a bum. You're either going to find your way to resolve this conflict. You're going to, in his case, becoming a successful boxer. So all these things that we want to become, maybe I want to become a good lover. Maybe I want to become somebody who's really loved by someone else. I want to become famous. I want to become known as a famous inventor. I want to have power. I want to have control. I want to be able to make decisions and then other people follow my orders. All those fantasies, when they come true, people often feel like, finally, this is it. This is it. But that just means they're not really stopping. They're not really assessing what's happening with their subject. You have to keep it going, keep it going. If you're not spinning that top all the time, it eventually will stop. But most of us don't think about just letting it stop. Most of us keep spinning and spinning and spinning. So another damaging side effect of this search outside of ourselves is that when we encounter the subjectivity of another, it's a very deep threat to my own subjectivity, because here I am trying to find objects in the world that will suit me, that I can bend to my will, that I can use in some way that suits me. And someone else's subjectivity really gets in the way of that. It really isn't an object I can just classify. The experience of someone else's subjectivity can be very disruptive to my own, really opening up and experiencing as yourself, as your subject, someone else's subjectivity. Whoa, it can be mind-blowing, really, if you get into it. There are many examples of this. Men can treat women as objects for sex or for status and ignore their subjectivity. Women can treat men as objects who should provide for them or give them status. If you ever go for an exam of your heart in an office that practices Western medicine, you'll find your heart treated as an object. The electric rhythms of the heartbeat, the pulsations, the contractions, the number of beats per minute, blood pressure, only what is measurable is counted. In the Western medicine model, the health of your heart has nothing to do with your subjective experiences, nothing to do with love, with your emotions, with your relationships. Nothing from the subjective realm is considered by most cardiologists. So I'll use a very silly example. I like the idea of a home improvement project because metaphorically that can map onto a lot of things. A lot of things can be considered your home, and including this whole planet. But a home improvement project can also mean just renovating your kitchen. And so when people renovate their kitchen, a lot of times it can turn into a disaster. Not just because the contractors are unreliable or whatever, but because with a project like this, you can end up putting a lot of hope in it. You can be hoping that the new counters or the new island or the new appliances, whatever all those things are, you can be hoping that they're going to make your life better, and perhaps they will. But there's often a feeling of deflation. What I'm talking about is when you're going after a project and you have that feeling of deflation afterwards, like, oh man, that's all this is? The whole thing was a success and that's it? Well, that's it. That's so important to recognize that you were pinning your hopes, some kind of subject-object split resolution. You were pinning that on the project itself, when the project never, ever in a million years could have helped you. It doesn't hurt you either. It doesn't do anything one way or the other. It's just, maybe lost time, not even really, because you needed to find that out. You needed to learn that renovating that kitchen, even metaphorically, for whatever it is, that project that leaves you deflated, that's a very important moment to recognize you have pinned your hopes. And then there's really nothing to do but to just sit quietly in that feeling and just recognize. I'll be getting to this more in episode 5. You just recognize that you had put your hopes in the wrong place. The moment that can possibly come is a moment that recognizes this is just another kitchen, and that all the awesomeness or the terribleness is based on me and my subject and me keeping track of how this is supposed to resolve my subject-object split. You may notice how this outside event doesn't really alleviate or harm or change anything at all about the split itself. This insight is very important. It can help you be still and a little more thoughtful about what you do with the outside of you. You can do things for the sake of doing them, not because they are going to alleviate the emptiness. You can do things outside of you just because they need to get done. And if someone questions you about the importance of doing this or that, why it makes sense for you to have this choice instead of that choice, you are open to the discussion because it isn't really personal after all. You are not using the event to bolster your subjective experience. Once you are not identifying with this or that, once you've let go of needing this object to do it for you, then you can hear other people's reasons why it may not be such a good idea to pursue it. And you can at least hear them and evaluate them. The hopeful, wonderful thing about recognizing in some way the equality of all the objects you could ever observe. All the objects are equally unable to help you resolve this split, and that is amazing. That is wonderful. That is the ticket to being able to look at them as themselves. They are things in and of themselves. They can come forward to you and present themselves to you, and you can be with them, observe them, interact with them, but you don't have to use them for your own selfish means. They're not ends to any means. They're things that you can use in this tremendous, wonderful dance with life. You don't have to use them selfishly. I think it can actually lead to caring more about other people, Because if you don't have to keep chasing things to solve your existential issue, well, then maybe you can become aware of all the subjective experience you've been missing. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next time. Please visit the home of the 10 Crutches podcast at 10crutches.link. That's 10crutches.link. The book that inspired the podcast, a book I wrote called 10 Crutches for Walking in the Present, is available for free download on the website. While you are there, please take advantage of 2 ways to contact me. You can send me an email, or you can make a voice recording. If you have a great question, I may be able to use it for the podcast. Also on the website, you can visit the archive to hear any published episode and see show notes for any and every show. Thanks so much for listening. And once again, thanks so much for listening. And I won't say it once again. See you next time.